I'm Jim Gravy. My business is Diligent Inc., and I'm an operations guy. I specialize in helping small and mid-sized businesses improve their operations. And I'm also known as the Bummer Guy. So you'll find me on the internet, particularly on LinkedIn, as the Bummer Guy. Well,
Bummer?
Bummer.
Bummer.
You know, it's a bummer, and we'll talk about that some as we go. Right? Today I'm going to talk about due diligence, and hopefully I'll show you why due diligence is a tool that even small businesses should be using that they may be overlooking today. The process investors use as part of their mergers and acquisition is called due diligence. And they use due diligence, they perform due diligence in three ways. They perform legal due diligence to check the legal status of the business. They look at contracts, they look at ongoing litigations, they look at the ownership of the business. And legal due diligence is pretty important when you're looking at acquiring a business. They do financial due diligence. They look at profit and loss statements, they look at balance sheets, they look at cash flows. They look at accounts payable and accounts receivable when they do a due diligence in order to get the financial status of the business. And they do operations due diligence. Estimates are that 50 to 70% of all the mergers and acquisitions that are done fail.
I will guess so.
Yes. Okay.
I know.
The estimate is that 50 to 70% fail. And so one of the questions is, what's that say about the quality of the due diligence that they did? It says that something went wrong, right? And when you look at the three types of due diligence, legal, financial, and operations, where do you think that you run into the most problems?
Financial.
Well, actually, investors generally have a competent attorney and they have a competent CPA. And so when it comes to doing their legal and financial due diligence, they have the principles of law and accounting to fall back on. And they do pretty scratch. So it's not in financial, it's in operations. And part of the issue is, what is an operations due diligence? What does that mean? Operations is a pretty broad term. Most of the failures turn out to be in operations due diligence. We have trouble identifying really what it is. Here's the first clue. Jim Collins, who wrote Built to Last and Good to Great, identified, showed that sustainable businesses are businesses that work as hard at developing their operations infrastructure as they do at developing their products and their services. So we know that having a strong operations infrastructure helps the business to be sustainable. The question becomes, how do you know? How do you know how well the business did? Did they create a good operations infrastructure, or did it fail? And so an operations due diligence should be looking at that. But then it comes down to, how does it look at it? Now, many people in this room may be operating small businesses, and at this point in time they're saying, my business isn't for sale. I'm not looking at selling it. So what does this mean to me? Right? I'm going to explain why they should care. Right? First off, you may decide to sell your business someday. And understanding what the due diligence process is a key to helping you position your business for that sale. So that's the obvious one. You may have to go through the due diligence. You might want to know what it is. I usually get a call from a business when they fail the due diligence. Gee, you know what? I was looking at this investor. I wanted them to put money in. They did a due diligence, and I failed it. And I need help. They said my sales group wasn't working correctly, or they found these problems, and can you come in and help me? That's kind of like saying, can you help me with the curb appeal on my house because I want to sell it? Can you help me with the curb appeal on my business? Well, yes, I can, and as a matter of fact, I help a lot of businesses with their curb appeal. But if the foundation is falling apart or the roof is leaking, then it's not just curb appeal, and maybe you should have called me well ahead of time in order to position the business. And so helping businesses position and figure out where are their issues is really part of what we want to try to accomplish. So when they get to that operations due diligence, it works. Occasionally I get a call from an investor who says, you know, we just looked at this business. Great little shop. They're an IT shop, and they really seem to have things going. We'd like to put some money in, but you know what? Their sales group isn't really there yet. Boy, if somebody was to help them improve their sales group, it might help their revenue. It might help them achieve that hockey stick they said they were going to reach. Jim, we want somebody to go in and work. Can you work with them? How long will it take? We'll come back in 6 months or a year and relook at the investment. So I get called from both sides of the table, both the businesses and the investor. I believe all businesses should be operated as if they're for sale. When you go to sell your business, you're going to say our revenues are as high as they can be. We're running as efficiently as we. So why wouldn't you operate your business like you were for sale? At all times, you should be out there looking at it. And oh, by the way, I'm talking about investors and how they look at businesses and what kind of due diligence, what kind of assessments they should do. You're an investor in your own business. Why wouldn't you want to ask the same questions about your business that somebody else would be asking?
Good point.
Why wouldn't you act as the investor in your business and perform your own due diligence on it? Now, here's my second clue. And if you're going to take one thing away from this presentation, I think what you should take away is sustainable businesses are businesses that minimize their risk and maximize their opportunities that they capture. By the way, some people will say risk and opportunity are two ends of the same spectrum. So minimizing risk, capture your opportunities, and that's how you build a sustainable business. The goal of an operations due diligence is to identify the latent operations risks that are in the operation of the business. That says, if we believe what Jim Collins said, then the way we assess the business is we look at it and say, where are your operations risks? Are you at risk of losing a key employee? Do you have a security risk that you haven't identified? Do you have a competitive risk that's coming up? And why wouldn't you want to, as a business owner, assess your risk? Enterprise risk management is becoming a large topic these days. Investors are now asking a lot of questions. They're not sure which ones to ask, but they're starting to realize they're asking questions about risk. What's the risk in that sales group? What's the risk in the organization? Do you have the right management, or is there a risk there that the management will fail? And you, as a business owner, should start to ask similar questions. All businesses should proactively perform risk self-assessments, a due diligence, an operations due diligence on their own function. Small businesses tend to have these aha moments, aha moments. And the aha moments that I hear most small businesses have is, oh, I should have seen that coming. That key employee quit. Oh, I should have seen that coming. Well, why didn't you see that coming? You had a risk that you ignored. Maybe you were too busy, or you failed to recognize that the risk was out there. You put it off until tomorrow, and then it's no longer a risk. Now it's a problem. So congratulations, you solved the risk. A risk is a potential for something to happen. There's a 50% chance, there's a 25% chance that this is going to occur. It's identified ahead of time, and you look at the likelihood that it's going to occur, and then you try to figure out how to mitigate or how to avoid the risk. And so a risk assessment, whether you do it as a formal, once a year, annual, I'm going to look at my business, or you do it as just an occasionally, and some things should be ongoing. A risk is, when the stuff hits the fan. I think the expression is due to occurs, and now you got a problem. Small businesses need to be looking at it at risk all the time. I refer to a risk that's been realized as a bummer. That's where the expression bummer came from. A bummer can kill a small business overnight. All of a sudden you get a letter from somebody's lawyer. I should have seen that coming. Okay. So let's talk about what bummers are. And here's some examples. These are real examples that I've seen from clients. Okay? And, oh, by the way, that could have been avoided. Your salesman left an extension cord duct taped to your showroom floor and someone tripped on it. Bummer. You know, you could have avoided it if you had thought about it. Your organization chart looks like a wagon wheel instead of a pyramid. Bummer. How many small businesses are person-centric and the boss is trying to manage everything? But now they're trying to bring in an investment and they're looking for their next level of growth and it doesn't work. Or the owner gets sick and nobody is there to fill in that space. Key employee just went to work for the competition. That happens pretty regularly. Could it be avoided? Sure it could have. Maybe you should have had non-competes with her once you recognize there was a key employee. Your landlord just rented out the space 4 doors down to your competition. Could it have been avoided? Well, maybe when you signed your lease, you should have had an agreement with the landlord that they wouldn't do that. You built that territory, you built that location, and now somebody else came in and offered a little more rent and could have been avoided. Oh, I should have seen that coming. Your brother-in-law can't do the job and you can't fire him. Bummer. Happens all the time. Right? Your sales pipeline needs drain up. Bummer. What's plugging it up? Maybe you should be looking at that risk and saying, you know, I had a good year this year, but is it going to be the same good year next year? Or is something going to plug up that pipe? And maybe I should look at that ahead of time. One of your customers came in with a complaint and your clerk told her, that's not our problem. Bummer. Your supply chain is starting to look like an anchor chain and it's holding you back. Bummer. These are all real examples of things that can and do go wrong, and I picked a set here that are particularly geared towards small businesses. By the way, I post bummers, I tweet bummers out at Greeby. We'll put you on my list to see some of these, and they are real world examples that come out. One of the problems with operations due diligence, people really don't know what an operations due diligence is or what it should consist of. My new book coming out November 11th, actually moved up to November 4th.
Hold that up again, let's get a good shot of it.
Is Operations Due Diligence, an M&A guide for investors in business. That's why I added the "in business" on there. Operations Due Diligence is a risk assessment, and businesses should be doing their own risk assessments. The book has 400 questions. It covers customer satisfaction, production, information management, sales and marketing, organization, personnel, financial operations, legal operations, and institutionalized processes. Say, well, you said legal due diligence and financial due diligence. Well, that's different than legal and financial operations. And the way I like to explain it is, your salesperson goes off for a meeting somewhere and they say, will you sign this NDA? And he signs the NDA without having had anybody review it. And the next thing you know, you've got an NDA that restricts some of what you can do in the field. From an operational standpoint, a legal operation, who authorized that person to sign that legal document? Did you have a policy that said only certain people can sign it? Same for financial operations. I had a call from a client whose engineering manager had signed an agreement. They were purchasing software and had a PO. Didn't realize that that software had an annual renewal on it, and they were committed for 5 years on it. So they were going to pay 5 times what they thought they were paying. Who authorized that PO to be signed? Operations covers a very broad range of potential risks. The idea of the book was to identify the questions that should be asked during due diligence, and that's thread pulling. They are the questions that should help you determine where and how some of the risks may be. And while it's not an established principle like law or accounting, hopefully with this book, operations due diligence does start to become standardized somehow. Thank you.